Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today, we are diving into what is honestly one of the absolute coolest wildlife success stories on the planet. We're talking about a genuine prehistoric survivor, the massive, large, one-horned rhinoceros, and we're going to unpack exactly how this incredible ecological victory was pulled off. So, right off the bat, September 22nd is World Rhino Day. And it's not just a date on the calendar, it's an urgent global wake-up call to save these amazing animals from the brink of extinction. Plus, it's a moment to really recognize the dedicated people on the front lines out there, literally fighting to protect them every single day. Now, when we talk about the great Indian one-horned rhino, this first number is, well, it's pretty staggering. 80%. A massive 80% of their entire global population lives in just one single Indian state, Assam. Think about that for a second. Which begs the question, how many rhinos is that exactly? Well, today, thanks to some seriously relentless conservation work by forest departments and local communities, there are over 4,014 of these incredible heavyweights thriving in Assam. To really grasp the sheer scale of this victory, we need to zoom in on what's actually happening on the ground and why this global awareness matters so much. Section 1. The importance of World Rhino Day, raising global awareness. Like I mentioned, World Rhino Day isn't just some basic celebration. It's a vital global platform. It shines a glaring spotlight on the massive threats these guys face, specifically illegal poaching and habitat loss. But equally as important, it's a day to celebrate the tireless conservation efforts. We're talking about the brave folks who actually risk their lives to keep our ecosystems balanced for future generations. Moving on to Section 2, the Indian one-horned rhinoceros, biology and ecology. Just look at the majesty of this animal. The Indian one-horned rhino is ancient. They've been around for millions of years, and that single black horn, it can actually grow up to 25 inches long. Combine that with their incredibly thick armor-plated gray-brown skin, and they are essentially living, breathing, prehistoric tanks. Oh, and out of the 3 Asian rhino species, this one is the absolute biggest. There's actually a super fascinating biological parallel going on globally, too. While the Indian and Javan rhinos over in Asia proudly sport just a single horn, their cousins, the Sumatran and African rhinos, rock 2 horns. It's just a really neat comparative snapshot of the whole global rhino family tree. Let's break down their biology a bit more, because these heavyweights can tip the scales at up to 2,800 kilograms. They usually live for about 45 to 50 years, and they're strict herbivores, munching mostly on tall elephant grass, leaves, and aquatic plants. But here is the absolute coolest part to me. They are critical ecosystem engineers. When they wallow in the mud in shallow waters, they literally carve out waterholes that end up sustaining a whole bunch of other wildlife in the wetlands. Next up, Section 3. Kaziranga, a global success, the ultimate conservation model. What's truly fascinating here is the sheer dominance of Kaziranga National Park in this story. Kaziranga holds the vast majority, we're talking around 70 to 80% of the region's entire rhino population. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site and, without a doubt, the absolute global epicenter for this species. And the gross data? It's nothing short of miraculous. Back in the 1960s, Assam had a dangerously low population, just about 600 rhinos left. Fast forward to 2024, and that number has skyrocketed to over 4,000. That includes a jaw-dropping 170% population growth just since the 1980s. This wasn't some happy accident. It's the direct result of intense management and incredibly strict protection. Which leads us to Section 4, Rhino Protection Measures, Legal and On-Ground Actions. So how exactly did they pull it off? Well, the groundwork for protecting them actually started way back in 1891 with the Assam Forest Protection Act. Decades later, in 1974, Kaziranga was officially declared a national park, which massively upgraded its legal shield. Then, in 2006, it gained tiger reserve status. And they've kept updating the laws, too. Like in 2009, they drastically increased penalties for poaching, even implementing life imprisonment and way higher fines for repeat offenders. All that strict legislation, it translated into massive, real-world impact. We see this dramatic, incredibly sharp plunge downwards in illegal poaching activities over the years. This was driven by aggressive anti-poaching strategies, heavily armed smart patrolling, and honestly, perhaps most importantly, deep cooperation from local communities to help mitigate human-wildlife conflict. Which brings us to a frankly massive, undisputed victory: zero. Absolute zero poaching cases were recorded in Kaziranga in the year 2022. Achieving zero poaching for an animal whose horn is so highly prized on the global black market, that is a huge testament to Assam's protective measures. But that zero didn't come easy. It came from a fiercely strict zero-tolerance policy. To send a loud, uncompromising message and just completely nuke the black market value, the government publicly burned 2,479 seized rhino horns. And they didn't just lock down the existing land. They aggressively expanded projected habitats. For instance, they added over 200 square kilometers to the Orang National Park just to give these growing rhino populations more room to breathe and thrive. All right, Section 5. Conservation Challenges. The fight is not over. Because look, as incredibly encouraging as the local data is, globally, the rhino is still in a severe crisis. Out of 5 species worldwide, 3 are critically endangered. There are only about 28,000 rhinos left globally, compared to 500,000 at the start of the 20th century. So India's focused revival in Assam is an amazing beacon of hope, but we have to remember it's operating against a pretty terrifying backdrop of global decline. And even in Assam, the struggle is definitely ongoing. First off, there are those relentless global smuggling networks. Over the last decade alone, around 10,000 rhinos were killed globally to supply horns for traditional medicine and status symbols, mainly going to China and Vietnam. Then, locally, Kaziranga faces the dual-edged sword of the Brahmaputra River floods. Yes, the floods naturally regenerate the ecosystem, but they are getting increasingly severe, forcing the rhinos to flee to higher ground, where they're way more vulnerable. Throw climate change into the mix, which extends monsoons and brings in invasive species that ruin their native grazing grasslands, and you have a highly volatile situation. Plus, human-wildlife conflict is on the rise as rhinos push into dense agricultural borders looking for food. So, we always have to remind ourselves why we take on these challenges. Protecting the rhino hits 3 major pillars: ecology, culture, and tourism. Ecologically, they maintain the habitat for countless other species. Culturally, they hold deep spiritual significance in Assam. And as for tourism, Kaziranga's ecotourism creates jobs and generates crucial revenue that funnels straight back into long-term conservation efforts. Which brings us to the ultimate question: can we save this majestic creature for the future? Well, the Kaziranga model proves that with strict laws, real community partnership, and just sheer willpower, it is entirely possible to pull a species back from the brink. But between a changing climate and relentless poaching networks, we definitely can't rest yet. The blueprint is in our hands, now it's up to us to maintain it. Thanks so much for joining this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.